why is all this research that says hormone therapy doesn't prevent cardiovascular disease lumping in synthetic progesterone with bioidentical progesterone? Like, it's just a string that just doesn't end. And it's just so interesting to me. I've had people who are experts say, yeah, and I'm learning a lot more about progesterone. I mean, I've seen one of the top menopause doctors in Britain maybe just a year ago saying, I'm really learning about progesterone. I'm like, oh my gosh, like how now are you learning about? But it's very much a divide between the mainstream medicine approach and the functional, more forward-thinking approach.
Welcome to the Menopause Mindset Podcast, the place to get some answers and feel supported along this often a bumpy journey. Many people sail through menopause, but many people don't. And so my guests and I are here to motivate you and inspire you so that you can make menopause a happier transition for yourself and for your loved ones. I'm Sally Garozzo, an award-winning clinical hypnotherapist, a menopause educator, and I can't wait to share my passion about wellness and how we navigate these changes and transitions. So come on then, let's dive in. So my guest today is Anne-Marie McQueen. Anne-Marie is based in the United Arab Emirates. She's a phenomenal journalist and the founder of her own global digital media platform, Hot Flash Inc. Anne-Marie provides information and inspiration to a fast-growing community of 50,000 plus people making their way through perimenopause, menopause, and the midlife transition. And she does this across her brilliant newsletter, her podcast, social media, and events both in real life and online. She's a former founding editor of health and wellness platform Live Healthy, former features editor at The National, and a former national columnist for Sun Media in Canada. So Anne-Marie McQueen, a huge welcome to the podcast today. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm quite, I'm on the mend, I think. I think I've had COVID. Yeah. I think I've had, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So,
yeah.
What did you say?
I said the small C. You know, I forgot how people sort of treat you when you have COVID.
Yeah, run a mile kind of thing. You have such a cool name. When I was thinking Anne-Marie McQueen, I love the name McQueen. It's like obviously giving me vibes of Alexander McQueen. I just love it. It's very rock star. Oh. Okay, so I don't have many journalists on the podcast, and I don't think there are that many menopause-specific journalists, although I think it might now be growing. But I was very excited when you agreed to come on and talk with me, because I love your sort of deep questioning around it and how you kind of synthesize so many other subjects into menopause too. And it's not, it's not just an estrogen deficiency, as we know, and you synthesize all of that into it. But before we get into all of that, how did you end up being a menopause journalist, would you say? And how was Hot Flash Inc. born?
Well, I mean, I've been a journalist for 30 years. I became obsessed with storytelling and, just telling stories, gathering information, finding out. I'm just like an insanely curious person. And so I was just trundling along on my career. I spent a lot of time in Canada. I came over to the Middle East. That's where I became an editor. So I really enjoyed being like an arts and life and features editor and just like pulling together a bunch of information. I studied broadcasting. I've always been interested in like digital and tech and kept ahead of the curve. And then I had a, ridiculously hard perimenopause without knowing I was in perimenopause. And then when the penny sort of dropped on that, I felt silly because I definitely should have known. But if I didn't know, how would anyone else know? And I immediately put a Google alert because that's what I always did when I wanted to learn about things. And I just didn't like what was coming back. I was very fear-mongering and doom and gloom. No celebrities were talking about it, which drove me nuts because they were starting to put celebrities on the cover of fitness magazines and they would talk about their fitness regimes, but nothing. Like there'd just be nothing about. And I'm like, it's this big elephant in the room, right? Like they're 47, they're 53. Like you're not asking them about this. And when I realized I was in perimenopause, I think 47, I put that Google alert. I didn't like what was coming back. And I was like, I just feel like this is such a crazy time emotionally and physically. And I'd already heard about what a transition it was spiritually and on a soul level. And I was like, I just feel like you could make this your beat. And I love having a beat because you become an expert in a way. And I'd done that before, like covering City Hall. You know, you just become so obsessed with the topic. And so I didn't know how to do it, but I just did a newsletter, and it was really clunky and cumbersome then. And I launched it, and I still am the only person doing it in the way that I'm doing it, right? Like there's a lot of journalists that are, I'm just writing about this today, the problem with menopause journalism. And I realize that having designated myself menopause my beat, I could be like the problem. But one of the big problems is that women were writing about menopause, but they're kind of like cheerleaders, you know, like it's very difficult to be objective about things when you've taken hormone therapy and it's changed your life. You're not really going to cover it in that way. So that's a very long explanation for you of how I got into it. And then I since learned I haven't been diagnosed, but I probably have ADHD because I just clock all the things, and selective hyperfocus is one of the things that I've had. So I'm not tired of it yet. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. So now are you going down that route as well with the neurodiversity and how the two start to link?
Yeah, and it's so interesting, right? Because I've always been the kind of person who would scoff at that kind of a thing and any label. And even in perimenopause, I sort of bristle when people are blaming it on everything and sort of owning it as like an identity. It's just a really powerful transition. And so I had a friend for years saying, I think you have ADHD. She was diagnosed when she was a kid. And I'm like, no, I don't. Like, I don't. There's no way. And then when you started hearing more and more and more about it, I don't want to have any sort of excuse. I just want to understand myself. And it really, learning about it is really helping me understand myself. And I think with the diagnosis, it would just give me like that actual confirmation. I know it seems weird that so many of us would have it, right? Like and then when I tell people, I think the reactions are just so crazy because people are like, everyone has it. Or people are just so dismissive when you have to be really careful who you talk about it with, because it's a deep, painful thing for me. I think it's a hyperactivity of the mind that you've been hiding and suffering from quite a bit at different times. And so, yeah, I'm saying it now, but I think I'll be a lot more comfortable talking about it if I get a diagnosis. And if I don't, I'll be really embarrassed.
I love your transparency. That's cool. And I love what you said about how when you have a beat, you can get quite obsessed with it. And I think there is actually quite a lot to get obsessed with in the menopause space because it's so all encompassing. It's not just about hormones, and I'm sure we're going to get into that. What I'd love to chat to you about is your podcast, right? I was having a little flick through, and you've had the most incredible guests on your podcast from, scientists and endocrinologists and naturopathic doctors as well. What has been the most paradigm shifting thing that you think you've learnt from one of your guests on the podcast? Or, what's been your favorite episode or anything like that, really?
Oh my gosh, that's a hard one, but I guess I would say how blown away I am by how much of the world doesn't pay any attention to progesterone.
Yes.
And how like blindly focused on estrogen they are, and how much the integrative naturopathic world is focused on that and doing such a good job. And then once I noticed that, there's just a huge ripple effect because like first I had to learn about that. And I learned it probably early on from a Dr. Christiane Northrup, who's been canceled. She was canceled in COVID. And she was Oprah's menopause doctor. And she was awesome. And I always wanted to talk to her. And I was so happy to have her on the podcast. And she was the one who was talking about it. And then from other people, I learned about it. But then you just start going, well, okay, so why is everyone quoting estrogen only studies? because why would you only give women estrogen? And why is all this research that says hormone therapy doesn't prevent cardiovascular disease lumping in synthetic progesterone with bioidentical progesterone? Like, it's just a string that just doesn't end. And it's just so interesting to me. I've had people who are experts say, yeah, and I'm learning a lot more about progesterone. I mean, I've seen one of the top menopause doctors in Britain maybe just a year ago saying, I'm really learning about progesterone. I'm like, oh my gosh, like how now are you learning about? But it's very much a divide between the mainstream medicine approach and the functional, more forward-thinking approach.
Yeah, it's interesting that you call it the more forward-thinking approach as well, because that's been my experience, unfortunately, of going my own way and seeking out private healthcare practitioners, like functional medicine practitioners, and having a Dutch test and going, oh wow, okay, what, why, and almost like being so angry that this kind of thing wasn't picked up, before by a mainstream doctor, and then just this whole swirl of emotions when you come to realize how invisible women's healthcare needs actually are in the mainstream, And yeah, I think, Christiana Northrup, she's been talking about this stuff for years. And when I first got into discovering and uncovering menopause, the world of menopause, hers was a book, an initial book that I picked up as well, on the power of pleasure and nitric oxide and how it sort of opens the blood vessels.
So far ahead. And it's from her that, even though I was in perimenopause, I didn't know I was in perimenopause. I think I heard something about menopause. And I remember there was a chapter in Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom, that big brick of a book. And I read it, and she was explaining what happens in the FSH levels and the LH levels rise. And then eventually you're at a stage where you are on that like amazing day of your cycle where you can take on the world. Like she said, this is your peak here. How do you feel here? And here's where those, and I was like, okay, well, I can deal with this. I mean, if I don't have to have those monthly, so I'm so sad that she's not part of the conversation. And, whatever you think of what she did in her retirement, it's like a really heartbreaking, because I'd like to talk to her again. Like, and I really can't, I just, people will just think I'm crazy. She's one of those people now, rightly or wrongly, but she was so far ahead, and she put it all together. And all this time later, so few people are doing that. And we still live in a place where there's fighting and scoffing from one side, saying, why would you do a Dutch test? It's a waste of money. Expensive testing is a waste of money. You can't test for perimenopause with a Dutch test. It's like, no, that's not what we're testing for. That's not what we're looking for, right? And so something I'm really interested, not that you asked, but just so before I forget, that the new thing that I think that has been maligned and ignored is how you detox your estrogen and what role that plays in your health. And I really do believe learning more about that will be something that we hear about, and we're going to be testing for our methods of detoxification. And we're going in the future of sort of like personalized medicine, that's going to be something that we'll look back on and we'll be like, oh, and then I suspect mainstream will be like really slow to pick it up because they don't know about it now at all.
Yeah, the way those estrogen detox pathways, because as you mentioned before, about progesterone and the importance of progesterone, we can become very estrogen dominant, and that tends to be the problem as we go into peri. It certainly was for me. And I know the first few weeks actually that I tried HRT, I was so puffy. I was so swollen. My boobs were like really, really sore. And then it was about 3 months in after taking the progesterone as well, cyclically. And I just thought to myself, because I knew about the progesterone, that's estrogen dominance before. And I was scratching my head thinking, why wasn't I prescribed progesterone first?
Yes.
And I think that's becoming more of a mainstream vibe now, isn't it? Slowly. Slowly,
because if you think estrogen is the main thing, which a lot of people still do, then, because I kind of call it the low and slow approach to hormone therapy. Like, I know there's these people prescribing physiologic levels, and I don't know very much about that. I'm going to be looking into it. But I mean, ideally, you're not torquing up your your levels of hormone therapy if you don't need to at this stage with what we know. Why not go on progesterone first? Why not see how you do? And then you know how you do on it. And then when you layer in estrogen, you know how you do on that. That just seems like you do that with any other sort of, that's what they do with advise with cannabis. There was a man who spoke at the menopause conference who's a couple of years ago who suggested low and slow approach when you're talking about it in terms of hormone therapy, when you're talking about it in terms of pain management. So yeah, I don't really understand. And I do all these things. Did you stay on hormone therapy?
I've had a very on and off journey with it. Kind of like, yeah, this is amazing. Oh my God, I'm really puffy and swollen. Like when I start getting really puffy and when my breasts start hurting, I come off it for a bit. I kind of play with it. And I know you're probably not supposed to, but I have such a good relationship with my body that I feel I can do that. And sometimes I do take progesterone on its own. So I'll get slapped by all the mainstream doctors and don't do as I do, like really listen to yourself and, get all the right advice and everything. But yeah.
If you're really suffering, like Vikram Talalakar, who I really like, he's a OB-GYN in the UK, has his own clinic. He's on my expert panel because I was very impressed with his like very gentle, curious approach to hormone therapy. He said you really have to give it 4 months, but I experimented with taking some progesterone recently. I don't really need it. I was just sort of seeing how I did, and I didn't go well at all. I was like intensely bloated, very blue. The sleep was great, but it was 2 weeks, and I'm like, I can't do this anymore, And my best friend said, well, aren't you going to try estrogen? Because you're writing about this, you need to try it. And I'm like, I don't know. I've had experiences with that before when I was younger, and it didn't go well either. And I just, you're the one who knows. Hopefully, because I also don't take my own advice. I tell people, keep a journal when you take something new. Well, that was 2 weeks of me going, why am I so bloated again? Why am I so blue? What's wrong? Until I was standing in my kitchen looking at the bottle going, so, right? I don't know. I didn't want to go I didn't want to go one more day feeling like that. So I think and that just shows how variable it is for women, right? Like it's just some people just swear by it. Like they just love it.
Yeah. Why were you blue and where were you blue, by the way?
No, I mean blue, like blue mood. Oh yeah. No, okay. It's not a side effect of progesterone that you turn blue. That would be misinformation.
I totally misinterpreted that.
That's great though. It's funny because over there I do have this methylene blue. It's supposed to be for your mitochondria. So I was like, was it blue? No. And if I get a drop of that on anything, it's game over. But no, I was low mood, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. Low mood. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah, it was not. And so I'm one of those really sensitive people to hormones. Like I just am. So, and I've had that estrogen dominance through my perimenopause. And looking back, you can sort of see the phases and see what was happening. But there was like my last few years, estrogen was high. It had to be because I was dating like crazy. I was dating and I would drive to Dubai for a date. I was dating different people. Like I'm just looking back now, like I don't have the energy for that. And my breasts were super, super, super sore. And, there's two schools of thought on sore breasts. Some can be progesterone, some can be estrogen. Like estrogen is sort of full on. And Dr. Geraldine Pryor, who's an endocrinologist, who's very well informed of progesterone, the sides are excess progesterone. But I mean, when your breasts are sore, you can't even tell, is it front, is it side? It's clearly, I was 50, and it's funny because I was just on a panel with a doctor, like a breast health doctor. And I said, we were talking about breast pain. And I said, why do your breasts get sore? And it was a bit cheeky of me because I wanted to see what she said. And she said, we don't know. And I was like, we totally know. We totally know why your breasts get sore. I don't know how could we not? Of course we know. So that just shows you that in the mainstream medicine, they don't even really, and I've seen doctors on social media when people say, I'm taking progesterone and estrogen and my breasts are really sore and I just can't, and they've said take a higher dose. And it's like, oh my goodness, So I think it's funny because you think the information is getting out there, but there's so many different layers. And sore breasts are really concerning, right? Like when you have that, you just feel like something's quite wrong.
Yeah. What surprises me is just the level of differing, differing opinions, differing thoughts, differing feelings. And it all depends on where you look, and it all depends on the filter that someone has, the paradigm with which they are coming from.
Yes.
And I bet as a journalist, you obviously understand bias, but I think media and social media that we have now, everyone has their own agenda. And so everyone's pushing something or coming from their slant. Even myself with the idea of trauma complex PTSD sort of underlying a lot of the symptomology that we see in menopause. I come to it from that slant, whereas other more, just mainstream medical doctors will just come through it from that reductive, it's an estrogen deficiency kind of slant.
Well, it doesn't make any sense though, Sally. Like it doesn't. No. And I'm so glad you're out there doing that. Because if it was just hormones, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but if it was just hormones, we'd all be the same. Yeah. With maybe some slight variation for where we live and what we eat and what our stress is or socioeconomic status, but it's not like that.
Yeah.
And I had a terribly hard time, and I know why. Because I had the same sort of adverse childhood experiences, inability to process my emotions, like overworking, overfunctioning, all the things now that I'm learning. Yeah. I'm learning about all of them, right? And you hit a wall because you can't stuff that stuff down for too long. And we know we have the data that it confuses things. So I don't want to see a doctor who doesn't understand that ever again.
Yeah.
And I'm not interested in talking to people who don't understand. I'm really not. Like one thing I seek out, and probably to my detriment, because when you have those big doctors on there, they're your top podcasts. And I like to talk to almost everyone, but not one note Nellies.
One note Nellies.
Yeah, no one note. It's boring.
Yeah. Okay. That's really cleared up some stuff for me. You refer to something called the menopause gap. I wonder if you could explain a little bit more about what the menopause gap is, because it's not something that I'm hugely aware of, and how it impacts women and what we can actually do about it.
So it's a little bit more about what we've been speaking to. Literally, how you proceed will depend on what, your own belief system and what you know and how informed you are. Most women are busy doing many other things other than obsessing about this stuff. But if you walk into a doctor who believes that the issues created in perimenopause and menopause are due to the recession and fluctuation of hormones, then you'll go down one path. And if you walk into the many, 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 many other people who believe that the problems are caused, the recession and fluctuation of hormones reveal the problem.
Ah, okay.
So one is saying that it's the problem, and one's saying that when those hormones leave and rise, and that's your problem. And that's a very simplistic explanation. And you've seen people grow very big on social media and become big celebrities with that explanation. Because that's a great message, and you don't have to get too complicated, and you can do it in 3 minutes. But most of the intelligent view of it is that those hormones protected us, and when they recede, it reveals what needs to be addressed. And I feel like that's the big gap, because if you're whose office you end up in is where you end up. Is what road you end up going down. And if you have that trauma, or if you have a thyroid issue that's presenting very much like perimenopause, or many, 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 many other things, the hormones are the cause for everything. The cause for everything are, it's not going to serve you.
No, you're not going to get the fix that you want, or you're not going to get the improvement and the recovery that you want, because it's not as simple as that. It's all interlinked.
Yeah. And, as someone I've had to do a lot of work. I've had to do a lot of things, and women don't have the time that I have. I mean, I'm a busy person, but I don't have children. And so the burden on women is insane. But I struggled and struggled and struggled physically and emotionally until I got the right doctor, I got the right care, and I started doing things to move this trauma and this way of dealing with the things in life that are hard and my own thoughts about it. That's when the needle really shifted. And as I passed through menopause, I did a lot of that, and I like cried my eyes out, and I moved things through my body, and I feel, not right now because I feel sick, but I feel it's such a tremendous difference. So I think we come here to sort out this stuff, to be the us that we were always meant to be, our real true selves. And I think that your best shot of doing that is to view this more as not an opportunity, but more a situation where you can clean up this stuff that needs to be cleaned up. In addition, doesn't mean hormone therapy won't help you. Doesn't mean you don't want to optimize your hormones for many reasons. There's many, many gaps though, like so many gaps. But there's gaps in no one wants to take care of us. Like OBGYNs are throwing us to GPs, and no one. There's gaps like that. But that's the biggest one, is the way it's seen.
Yeah, the way menopause is seen by the sort of centralized medicine.
Yeah, and if you look at it as revealing, but then a lot of things make sense through that paradigm. Some of these, some of the blood pressure issues that are revealed, and the metabolic issues that are revealed, and all of those things can be addressed with hormone therapy or without, usually. So that just makes a lot more sense. That sort of more but it's more of a nuanced, complex thing, and we know that the world isn't very much into that.
Yeah, exactly. So, what did you do? What things have you done? What practices have you done to really help you address this sort of holistic stuff that was coming up at this time? The trauma wounds and the all the dysregulation. Do you have any favorite practices? Tell us about them.
Well, so my particular issue, and I had IBS for years, from around 30, after I lost my mom and started journalism. And, I now realize that in addition to childhood stuff that probably we all have as children of the time that we were, I had some trauma from my journalism career, I know the smell of a dead body, and I've seen a bloody murder scene, and I've seen someone pulled out of the river. I've been to some really horrible situations, and I'm a really sensitive person. And I used to drink a lot of alcohol. So that was also in there, right? And so when my health blew up, I tried many, many things. In my 40s, I tried so many things, and I have so many tools. But the big things were finding the right doctor who was a GP and a homeopathy double major from Norway. She also has a gut health specialty and counseling. So finding her, having someone that spent an hour with me, asked me about everything in my life, saw the totality of it, and said, you've been through a lot, and you have low thyroid, Hashimoto's, leaky gut, prediabetes, fatty liver, and we're going to help you, and you're going to be better in 3 months. It took 6 months. That was the main, just finding her. And I just sort of think that came to me through the universe, because I had seen many people, and I was going to try hormone therapy. And I'm just glad I didn't in that regard, because she doesn't believe in hormone therapy. And I always joke that I have to go behind her back to give it a whirl. But aside from that piece, I really major breakthroughs. I did therapy. I did talk therapy. And I just did 4 months of therapy because I lost my father, and it revealed some family stuff. It was 4 months targeted, really. I just basically hired someone for support, and it was great. But nothing helped me more than breathwork and somatic body work. So tremor and release exercises. And I took the Workout Witches course, which was a month of just these microscopic hip movement relaxation. I cried more during that time. than I ever have. My homeopathic doctor gave me a remedy that she said would release something from my miasma. And I still have to have her on my podcast. She's so busy, and ask her what the heck that meant, because it floored me, absolutely floored me. Okay, what else? In perimenopause, one of the most helpful tools of all, and I still use it, is something called the Brainwave app. It was $5.99. It was literally one of the first apps I bought. It's now $7.99. Brainwave app. It's very simple. I think it's like Brainwave app 35. That is just something, using binaural beats, you can entrain your brain. So when you feel rage, it has anger reduction. When you can't sleep, when you're at work and you can't concentrate, you can put like these, focus brainwaves. I have woken up rageful, and I'll put it on, and by the time I'm at work, I'm calmer. Like, that is like one of my number one tips. And anytime I mention it, and someone just wrote to me and said, I thought it was woo-woo, and then I tried it, and it was like, it's a miracle. And I'm like, I know, it's a $7.99 miracle.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'm big into that. I mean, anything to do with brainwave entrainment, it's so soothing. I've got tuning forks as well, like the live sound of the tuning fork. I've got all the different, I'm such a sucker, I'll collect anything like that. Yeah. Weighted ones, unweighted ones you can put on your body. If you're feeling really activated, like in your solar plexus, you can put this one on your solar plexus, and it just calms everything down. But even just listening to a live tuning fork, slow, because your brain waves entrain themselves, they mirror the coherent sound of the tuning fork.
It's science, like it really is. And they have studied it. And there's a reason they use music in operating theaters. And, entrainment is like when you see a flock of birds and they're all flying together. You're just taking your chaotic brain waves and matching them to a more calming frequency. That's it. So simple. It's not a crutch or a tool. It's just a really wonderful. It's just a wonderful thing for women in perimenopause. We had the GCC Menopause Summit here, and it's really cool. Dr. Sarah Scaff, who spoke, and she said something I'll never forget. She said, I have patients who start out at the top of the stairs in a good mood and end up in a bad mood at the bottom. And I was like, yeah, that can happen, where you're just like, I was just washing the dishes and I was fine. And now I'm like, so that's one of my top tools. And something else, I had, all my life, I had intrusive thoughts. And now I'm remembering that I even had them as a little girl. Like, now I remember driving with my mom and saying, slow down, please slow down. Because obviously I'd had a thought that we were going to crash. That's an intrusive thought. I never knew what to call them. And they got crazy in my early perimenopause, like just terrifying. And they would just hit me with like a sheet of fear. I'm just, there's a dragon in front of me, and I had such a hard time, and I didn't understand what was going on. And I found Cheryl Paul, and she wrote a book called The Wisdom of Anxiety. And she has a website called Conscious Transitions. And the most effective thing, she said, like, this might be about me thinking, okay, I'm dying. My house is burning down. Something happened to my family. When she, all this stuff was obviously hormonal, and, the progesterone's receding, but her questions like, when you're having these thoughts, like, how are you not taking care of yourself? What is this trying to tell you? Just looking at anxiety as a sort of a messenger, health anxiety about your relationship. She talked a lot about, you want to check. I remember at one point I wanted to say to my dad and brother, when I text you please text me right back, because you have no idea. Because I'm texting them because I had an intrusive thought that something happened to them. And when they don't text me back because they're two dudes, it might be a day, right? And then I'm just like, but then I remember thinking it's not their responsibility to do that. And this isn't real. It feels real, but it's not real. So she really helped me. And with health anxiety, which is no wonder it's a problem for all of us in perimenopause, right? Like, you don't know what's going on. And so she said, it will become apparent. It will become apparent. If something is really wrong, it will become apparent. And so that's when I sort of started being like, okay, if I still have this in 5 days, if I still have this weird thing in my skin that I think is melanoma, in 5 days, we'll go to the doctor. I'm going to survive till then, and it's usually you've forgotten all about it.
This episode is brought to you by my Talked About masterclass, How to Heal the Trauma Underlying Your Menopause Symptom Severity. Have you ever wondered why you still feel anxious and overwhelmed even though you try to do all the right things? It might be to do with unprocessed emotional trauma lodged in your body, preventing you from accessing a sense of safety that unlocks the door to your body's natural healing and health potential. So here's what we're going to cover in this class. We're going to cover the surprising way your childhood might be affecting your menopause symptom severity and the research to back this up. We're going to cover why trauma is not just about big events and how our subtle childhood needs not being met play into this idea that most of us have some degree of CPTSD and how that might be impacting our menopause. We're going to cover why menopause is the can opener on our history, our childhood, and our dysfunctional patterns that might be making menopause worse. We're going to understand what self-regulation is and co-regulation is, the vagus nerve, the stress cycle, polyvagal theory, and why you cannot fully understand menopause until you understand the nervous system. We're going to learn about how the brain and our perspectives play a role in our menopause transition, what the research says about the mind's involvement in aging, and how knowing all this can help our experience of menopause. We're going to understand why the old paradigm of menopause needs a complete refresh and what the new paradigm actually looks like. So if you're ready to take a completely new look at menopause, join me for this incredibly powerful and inspiring, no fluff, 2-hour session that's backed by research. The price of this experience is just £17, that's 17, and everything is housed neatly inside the Kajabi app for your convenience. So just head on over to sallygarazzo.com/healing trauma to watch it now, and of course that link will be in the show notes. So that's sallygarazzo.com/healing trauma. Enjoy the rest of the episode. This episode is brought to you by my on-demand workshop called Redefine Your Values at Menopause and Live Life in Alignment with Them. If menopause has given you lemons, this workshop will help you make the tastiest lemonade ever. Maybe you're feeling unsure about what truly matters to you now at this point in your life. Maybe you're feeling indecisive about your next steps and need some oomph to help you make a decision. Or maybe there's something about where you're at in your life that feels a bit off, and you're wondering how on earth you got here. Whatever your reason, I've got your back in this workshop. In this workshop, we're going to peel back the layers and you're going to understand yourself in a way you never thought possible, enabling you to make powerful decisions going forward. To grab a copy of the workshop that you can do either alone or with friends or with another person, just go to sallygarazzo.com/redefine. And that link will also be in the show notes. So she gave you some tools to just sit with that uncomfortable feeling, and to kind of ride it out and then, act on it if need be. Because you're right, I definitely have had experienced intrusive thoughts during menopause, and, just the scale of them that come up in the middle of the night, or just, you could be washing the dishes and then boom, like oh God, you're really freaking out. And it is some stuff that's coming up to the surface, as you say, like it's revealed, like the shit that you haven't dealt with tends to get revealed at perimenopause. And it's an invitation, isn't it, to dig deeper, look deeper, and figure out what's going on for you. And I have actually found it very, very illuminating for me. I don't know if you have that experience as well. And even though it's been super challenging at times, I wouldn't change it because I've learned so much about myself, and I feel much more in charge of my life now. I feel more authentic. I feel more autonomous. I feel like I've dealt with a lot of historical baggage. I'm now coming around to loving my parents more unconditionally, which I never thought would happen, but it's happening. Coming around and feeling good about the fact I don't have children like yourself.
That's a big one.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's a big one. So thank you for sharing all of that. And there's something that you do called 9D breath work, isn't there?
That's the breath work. Yeah.
Yeah. What is that? What's the 9D?
I started doing it. This fellow Arslan in Dubai started doing it, and I don't know how. I think I saw him talking about it on Instagram, and I was running a health and wellness website, so I was just always looking for cool stuff that was happening here. And I like this guy a lot. He's really cool. He's like a high performance coach. And so I went to try one, and it was unbelievable. It's a new form of like breath work on steroids. So you have these headphones, it's binaural beats, it's some hypnosis. This guy that invented it during COVID, he just got all these great sound engineers, and he does these journeys. And then now he's spreading it around the world with, because I get his free ones, and he's always trying to get you to become a practitioner, which I would like to do when I have time. And I just had some of the most, you do the scream, you do the breathing, your hands all sort of, you get this thing called tetany that your hands like curl up. I get these weird, like nervy feelings in my face. I've cried my eyes out. You scream. It's moved things through me. I guess I started that in the end of 2023, around the time that I was doing the body work. And I started it then, and I've just done it sort of semi-regularly through, not all the time, like every couple of weeks maybe, and then with gaps. I cannot say enough about it. And I don't think you need to do 9D breath work. Like there's another app that I have, Revelation Breathwork. It's the same sort of thing. Just breath work is, I don't know, do you do it? Like, have you done it?
Yeah, definitely. I find it transformational. I do some of the Wim Hof stuff. At the end of the day, I'll go and do some panting and breath holding. And when I hold my breath, I get this intense feeling of the parasympathetic, the vagus nerve being stimulated, and just instantly coming down into that parasympathetic state. It's incredibly freeing and liberating. I've also done some breathwork classes where with the music playing and, getting rid of all the stuff, but also actually feeling expanded. I've had some of those incredible expanded states of awareness and consciousness, and just feeling so lucky and full of life force. And
that you're connected to something larger, right? Like this has really helped me feel that way. And then this is another thing about going through menopause for me is like, I've just had an awakening where, I lost my father almost a year ago, and I'm more certain of ever that we come from somewhere and we go back there. Like, I just feel so certain about it. And I used to think people like me were really annoying. It's like, oh, don't you just know everything? It doesn't matter. I'm not telling anyone. My own self. I used to be terrified of dying or whatever. Now I'm like, okay, well, it's just like, I didn't remember before I arrived. I'm just going back there. I think it's going to be fine. Like I don't want to live for a long time. Don't get me wrong. But that's a huge thing. And I did a lot of Wim Hof. I did a Wim Hof workshop right before COVID in 2020. And so I did a lot of morning Wim Hof breath work. I had quite a lot of morning dread, even into like my later stages of perimenopause. I had really bad morning dread in my late 40s where you just, you open your eyes and it's fine. And then like, dun, dun, dun. I don't know how else to explain it. And I found that Wim Hof and then putting my face in ice water were two morning things that I did to deal with morning dread. They just really, the ice water just snaps you out of it, and you can't help but do like the Wim Hof 11 minutes that's on YouTube. And that's going to shift you. And, Wim Hof was in Dubai last week, and I went there for something else. I went to do a couple of podcasts for this festival that he was at, and I went and asked him, and I took a video of it, and I was so excited, and I put it on Instagram, and no one liked it. No one likes anyone asking a man anything about perimenopause. Like, it's just not tolerated. And I'm always like, yeah, but he's Wim Hof. Like, you know what I mean? Like he's, and then everyone was talking about like, he's having some legal problems, and I was like, oh, I just wish I didn't bother. I was so excited to ask her.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. There's some frosty responses. I actually looked at some of your comments on seed oils.
Okay, you saw that today. Oh my God.
Yeah. Was it today that happened?
That was this morning, that I woke up to those. I know, it's so crazy because you're just like, okay, I'm going to put this quote. I put it in my newsletter because I always thought about it. It's a little bit old because we did a menopause summit with this Dr. Kate Shanahan, who's written the book. I think it's called Dark Oils, and she's, a leading thinker on it. And then just woke up to getting ripped apart. And it's very hard to argue with because this is one of those situations where our shared reality is dissolving.
Yeah.
If you are, the evidence shows, I get it. Like the evidence shows this is dangerous. You're talking nonsense. But the evidence from like the interconnectedness between industry and the economization and you have to be able to see that. And I'm going to bungle the explanation of it. There's a journalist, James Lee, who does a really good job of explaining how industry, economy, and the seed oils work together. And if you don't see that, then everything's fine. And you're crazy if you talk about anything to do with seed oils being bad for you. Am I making any sense?
Yeah, you are. Yeah, definitely.
It's not my area of expertise.
No, but isn't it like that with everything, right?
Well, I feel this issue is one of the ones that's like absolutely bonkers. It's sort of like COVID in a way, right? Like it's like you look at it one way or the other, and it's like, well, couldn't it just be, because I, for one, when my gut was not good, I could not tolerate anything with any oil. I had to be so careful. And yes, I'm sure there's people who can just eat those things all day long. But, when you look at how they're made, it's really, I find it very weird that you would be a nutrition professional in 2025 and be rushing to defend like a highly processed food. It's very odd.
When you think about it logically as well, you think about the way that we were years and years and years ago, like how humans are designed to eat. We're designed to forage, we're designed to pick, hunt, dig. Yeah. We're not designed to pick lots and lots of rape seeds and tiny little things and then crush them and distill them and express them. That's industry. And
bleach them. Have you like the process of how you make those? It's gross. And anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you. It's just a completely different. Yeah. If I was making cold pressed rapeseed oil and I lived in Norway, like fine. It's like, that's no problem. It's not that, maybe it's the name of them. I don't know what, but today I did feel like, why am I bothering? I just thought I'd put up an interesting piece of content and people can say, hey, this is interesting. I'll learn more. Or they can just keep going. Like it's not, someone said it was dangerous. And I'm like, I do not understand how it would be dangerous to share a quote from an expert on something because it's dangerous because you don't like it. Like how is that dangerous? I must be missing something.
Yeah. I feel your frustration and I feel exactly the same way, when I'm talking about complex trauma, underlying menopause symptom severity, and then get a whole load of people unfollowing me. I feel that frustration. Yeah, definitely. Because I'm about to put another post out actually about the myth of the happy childhood, which is going to piss a lot of people off, but I'm going to do it anyway because I have to remain true to my values.
You absolutely do. And gosh, you second guess yourself. And like today I wasn't feeling well and I don't want anyone to feel like sorry for me or whatever. It's just like, oh man, like, can't you just move on? Like I don't like when people just like fly in to attack you. Like, it's like, were you just waiting for a hashtag and then you just come like that's, but I think with what you're talking about, it's really destabilizing for a lot of people. And when I started looking at this, I was like, no, my family was great. Like I grew up in a nice house and it's such a journey from that to what actually happened in a lot of people's houses. Very few. I always say you didn't have to be chained to a radiator. That's not politically correct, but it didn't have to be what you think. It just mattered that how you felt when you were little, right? Like, a lot more about this than me, but I get those strong reactions. The ones that are just like you're arguing with a wall and people are just rabid. This happens with hormone therapy too. Like I saw a doctor put a post up that was talking about the side effects from hormone therapy, and someone told her it was irresponsible. And it's like, that's not irresponsible. That's actually irresponsible.
Yeah, it's a crazy world we're living in through the media, through social media. It really is.
How do you deal with it when you get it in the neck like that? Like it's hard. Right?
I recognize it's a threat to people's to people's worldview. Yeah. And people hold on to their worldview, and they become very identified with their worldview. And if they're not used to having psychological flexibility and being able to go, oh, maybe I'm wrong, maybe there is something. You have to, I suppose it's really threatening to people who have constructed their whole life around one way of thinking that has been funded by big oil or big pharma or something. And then all of a sudden they're starting to see the truth. They are going to, generally speaking, act out with anger. And it is a projection. It's maybe the rage that they feel internally at being hoodwinked, projected outwards because they're not actually ready to see it yet.
I feel that feeling. That's anger first. When you're telling me something I think I know, I know so little. Like how can I not know this? And I went through all of this with journalism because to me, when I was a journalist, I just wanted to tell stories, and I was fair, and I would talk to everyone. And, whenever anyone would criticize journalists, which they always do when you're at a dinner party or whatever, they always have something to say about where you worked or the media. And I would get really, really hurt about it. But it was only when I turned 50 that I started to see the media for what it is and how I played that role. Like how, the people I chose to talk to, for the most part, wanted to be in the newspaper. And so what they, even now, like if someone chooses to speak to me, like what, everyone's got an angle and everyone's got a belief system, and it's all sort of funneled. Like your editor comes and says, this is happening, go look into this. And then you get to and it's only as I got later in my journalism career when I was like, I'm not going to be able to work for a mainstream publication anymore. It became harder and harder to do that. I actually had a column in Canada, and it was just impossible because they just wanted me, like they would say, can you do this? Can you do it this way? And I'd be like, well, no. And, this is just a simple example, and it has nothing to do with menopause, but I was writing for the newspaper here, and they said, they're taking away the expat packages, and no one wants to come and work here anymore. Can you do a story on it? And I'm like, okay. But I talked to all the recruiters, and they were like, we're taking away the expat packages because so many people want to come here. It's not a hardship posting anymore. Like that was the truth, right? And the editor, he just wasn't happy with my story. So that's a long-winded way of saying, I get it. And it's painful when you have a belief system, and if you're in a career in a field, because then it's just a bit like this, like what's real?
Yeah, it can be very destabilizing for people. But yeah, I think it's useful to talk about. It's useful to be really transparent about, especially in the menopause space when people are looking for the right kind of information for them. Like a lot of it is about trusting your intuition and knowing yourself. The more you know yourself, the more you know your values, the more you are in touch with your body wisdom as well. And I know you've done a lot of work on that with the somatic therapy that you've done. The more we build up that relationship with our intuition, the more we get that yes feeling, the more we get that no feeling. And also the more we understand about psychology, human psychology, the more we can see a narcissist as well and how they might be just...
Holly, don't even get me started. Because your whole life, you just override. My whole life was like, oh, it's not what I think. No, it's me. It's me. It's me. It's always me. And so menopause is a great equalizer of that, because I've shed a few friendships where it's like, it's not me. I'm going to stop looking at my role in this friendship. This friendship isn't working. And it only worked when I finagled myself, to make it happen.
I noticed your recent blog about relationships actually. I didn't read the whole thing. I'm not a paid member, but
I'll give it to
the
you.
initial newsletter. I thought, yeah, it's really interesting actually. So, how have your relationships changed as you've gone
Uh,
through this transition? Because it's a
yeah. So,
subject that not a lot of people talk about.
yeah. I mean, I think they talk about how it's hard on marriages, and it
Yeah.
is. It's hard on marriages for the obvious reasons. Like you're living with a turbulent person who doesn't really even know how she feels. That's hard on a marriage. Maybe your libido isn't working and but to me, it just transforms all your relationships because you really do go from like being more concerned about what other people think and feel and how they feel, which is very damaging. And you weren't like that when you were a little kid. When you were a little kid, you know, you cared about yourself first, which is really, it's not selfish. It's what we should all be doing. And then you kind of come back and you're caretaking yourself. You become a mother to yourself. And so that's going to shake up a lot of relationships. And, I had a couple of relationships that I would feel like when I was with the person that we were in a danger zone. You know that when you're in a conversation with someone and I joke that it's like a truck backing up, like, doot, doot. Like I don't want to. It's not that we have to agree all the time. I don't want to spend time with people like that anymore. Who I just feel like the way I am and the way I talk is just like they're. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. And friends that were mean, like just mean, say mean things that aren't kind, or condescending. And I've had a couple of friendships like that. And I had my own relationship with a narcissist between when I was 44 and 46 and completely lost myself, completely abandoned myself in that because he's a narcissist and a skilled liar. So when I was around him, I felt great. But when he wasn't around me, I felt awful. And my brain would kick up and I'd get pinched nerves and I would feel so anxious because my body was like, something's not right. Like, this doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. Those people, he ended up having like, he was on Tinder. He had a whole other relationship and a wife. And he told me he was divorced. And that makes sense because he was always very tired and he was always late. Like he was always like, I'm on my way. But I just spent so much time. It just wouldn't happen again. It just wouldn't happen again. And when I saw that, and I had that happen with a friendship too, where I just had a friendship where, and in that Substack I sent out, the common denominator is that when they were the person who had it together, and I was the person who was like doubting myself and deferring all the time, then the relationship worked. And then when I used my own two eyes and put myself first, then the narcissist is a narcissist. That's not going to work out. But the friendships don't work when I'm like more me. And that's really telling. So, and they just started feeling like, we're just like this, even in a conversation, you just know, it's just like, I don't know how to explain it. And I used to think in that piece, I talk about how I had a massage, like, a couple of years ago, and I was telling the woman about this friendship problem, and she was older than me, and she said, you don't always have to have like a big discussion when it's friends. You can just fade away, and they're here, and you're there, and you can come back if you want, but you don't have to be close. And she's like, just try, like, and I wasn't able to do it. I was never able to do it because I wanted to be so liked and to have someone always hanging around them. But I was able to do it after menopause, and I call it the Homer in the hedge. You know that GIF of Homer when he's like Homer Simpson when he's like backing into a hedge. So yeah, that's what I call it because I'm just like, I'm in the hedge if you need me, but like I don't really want to hang out with you anymore.
So you're more boundaried, would you say, like in those situations? Yeah.
And there's always been a last moment where I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. That lunch was terrible, or that phone conversation was so. When you spend so much time in your 40s. I went away on vacation with some friends who were 10 years younger than me. And I saw myself so much in them because you just spend so much time like perseverating and focusing and talking about like other people and the way they make you feel and the whatever. And I sound like judgmental old lady, but I was like, wow, that's freeing because that's what I was like. And so now when I spend time with someone who makes me feel like that, I just think like, yeah, that's not a person for me. Like, that's just not a person that's going to be close. Like, I'm having all these annoyed thoughts. They annoyed me. I can admit that I am annoyed by someone and be okay with it. I could never do that, Sally. Like I'd always be like, Anne-Marie, what's wrong with you? You're so intolerant, you know? Maybe I am.
Yeah, you'd be taking the blame. It'd be awful.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I wasn't, like, I didn't think enough of myself that I could just have an actual reaction to a human, unless they were super awful, you know? Like,
yeah, like blindly awful. Yeah, and just
yeah.
Yeah.
The narcissist thing is a big one. Like, and I think we should just all learn in school, but it'd be weird because in school there would be like, what is it? 1 in 6 have these tendencies. So you'd have this little, like, all these little narcissists who would never recognize themselves. Like, narcissists never know they're narcissists, right?
Yeah.
Just
Can you imagine that? Like, and half the teachers as well, probably.
Teaching about oh my God, I didn't even think about it. Like, it's nonsense. It could never happen. It's just, it would be great if you could learn, you know, like, I remember in a TV show once a man explaining to his daughter that there's some people that are in it to win it. And the sooner you can realize it, the better off you'll be.
Yeah, I wish I'd understood what narcissism was, you know, many, many years ago. I wouldn't have got into the scrapes that I've got into.
Scrapes.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, the really dodgy situations. So, Anne-Marie, we're going to start wrapping things up. What final question can I ask you? Well, I want to ask you about your business and how people can work with you, but we'll do that after your final question. Let's see. Oh, yeah. When you say the phrase midlife reinvention, what does that spark within you? What ideas are sparked within you when I say midlife reinvention?
Well, I felt very much now like I did when I was 30, 31, just fired up, just so excited about all the things that I wanted to do and feeling like there wasn't enough time and how am I going to, but I have like much more in the way of skills and wisdom and my head's together and, you know, financial stability to be able to do them. And I think the 40s were for me a real time of like knowing that I wanted to do something else and just not having an idea what it was, not having any confidence about what it could be, having a good job and I guess the golden handcuffs or whatever, and just really trying different things, but just sort of half-heartedly. And then, so midlife reinvention is sort of, I feel like when it comes together and you just become, you know, you get those nudges from the universe and they don't go away and you follow them and then it feels good and then you follow them. That's what I think it is. And I think it can be anything you want it to be. And we're in such a great time because we have all this tech and digital stuff that helps us like we're talking like this, like, look what you can do, look what I can do. And then when that goes together, when your passion's reignited, when your hormones settle down, it's just like, I think it's magical.
Yeah, I'm very early post-menopause now. And for the last 4 months, I have just started to feel absolutely freaking amazing. I'm like, thank God.
Yeah.
Like, I think I'm putting weight on now because I just don't give a fuck either. And I'm like really into sort of pleasure and again, going out and having a really good time. Whereas in my perimenopause, all I wanted to do was just run away and hide and isolate because it was so traumatic. And my body can't handle as much sort of in the gym as it used to be able to now. So my workouts are lighter, which is really nice.
That's good.
Yeah. And mentally, I just feel so free. I feel really comfortable with myself. I feel comfortable talking to people who before I would have considered like, oh, you know, I can't be around them. Like, I'm not worthy.
Yeah, that ease, right? Like that ease of being yourself. I had a lot of people have social anxiety and I did too. Just really feeling self-conscious. I notice now, like, I don't sweat what to wear. I don't sweat. Like if I was going on a date, which maybe I will soon, I've taken a break from dating. I know I used to obsess, like, where will I say we meet? It has to be perfect. No, that place is too quiet. No, that place is too loud. No, that, like, none of this stuff, all of this stuff is really calms down, I think.
Yeah.
And the workouts, like, I used to have, one of my problems was I had to work out like a crazy amount to deal with my anxiety and stress and to stuff everything down through working out. So when that passes, I don't know. I like, it's a strange feeling, right? It's like, oh, I'll do some weights and I'll go for a walk. And like, I don't need to like burn off this.
You're absolutely bang on. Like, I couldn't have said it better myself. That's the key because I don't have that anxiety anymore.
Yeah.
I don't need to constantly be burning it off. So my muscles and fascia and everything can just take a bit of a break.
Yeah,
For sure, it was probably overworking out. Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't good for us, I don't think.
No, definitely not. It's been amazing chatting to you. What's next for Hot Flash Inc? Have you got any big, bold plans, or are you just ticking it over?
No, this year, so I'm writing a book. I'm going to be publishing that on Amazon in September.
Amazing. Can't wait.
And then I'm going to do a course on the back of the book. So that'll just be bringing like the most actionable things to help people go through perimenopause, whether you're in it or I would love to get people who aren't in it yet, like just a very actionable manual. Because, sometimes you read these books and they're just like, they go off in all these different directions and there's too much information almost. It's like, I just want to help people. I just want a manual basically for what I needed. So that is a big undertaking, but that's what I'm doing. And that's my big monetization thing too, because this has been quite a hobby. I have definitely made money. I have sponsors and things like that, but this is the next leap because honestly, you can't do it forever.
Without making some decent money, for sure.
Exactly.
But you do one-to-ones, don't you? Like you work
in the
corporate world, but you also, if someone's listening to this thinking, you've got some good information, you've spoken to a lot of incredible people on your podcast, so you've done a huge amount of your own research, and we haven't really gone into a lot of the complexities of it. So if you do want to get an idea of how much Anne-Marie actually knows, then do listen to her own podcast. But you do one-to-ones with people, don't you?
I absolutely do. And, they're like, I'm a journalist, not a doctor, but I could absolutely just answer questions and help you cut through a lot of this confusion and present this to you if you didn't know what to do. And the other thing that I can do is if you have a business, you want to know the lay of the land, I have a real global view of sort of the landscape of what's going on. And what products are there and what research is being done. Not all of it, obviously, but I have a pretty well-rounded view on it. So those are the two things I offer one-on-one.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
And if you need a pep talk, if you need a perimenopause pep talk, I'll give it to you.
That sounds like I could have done with that a few years ago for sure.
We're just doing the stuff we could have done with,
Exactly.
It's nice.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. It's been amazing.
Thank you.
So I'd love to know what your biggest takeaways were. Be sure to leave a comment below and subscribe, like and share. Just so you know, not all podcasts are uploaded here. So if you want the full array of episodes, head on over to Spotify or Apple and search The Menopause Mindset. You also might like to come and find me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn or TikTok. Just search at Sally Garozzo Mind Mentor. All right, folks, thank you so much for your support and attention. It means the world. Have a great week and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.